to TribalNet webinar series, where Arctic IT and their technology partners present on the hottest topics in tribal technology today. Leading off this series is Why the Cloud Now, a Cloud 101 guide for tribal administrators. Presenting today are Phillip Jackson from Arctic IT and Matt Quig from Microsoft. Phillip serves as Arctic IT's Chief Information Officer and works closely with specific tribal and Native Alaskan clients on technology strategy. Presenting with Phillip is Matt Quig. He has been in technology solution sales for 5 years, previously with Veeam Software. Mac is the Azure Solution Specialist for tribal nations, gaming, and Alaska Native corporations for Microsoft. Mac presented last month on a similar topic to our presentation today. So welcome back, Mac. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Phillip. Phillip, take it away.
Thanks, Chuck. Let me see if I can. And can we see, Chuck, can you see the presentation?
All looks good.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for Mac for joining me. And let's just jump right in to why the cloud now, and what that means for tribal administrators. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover in today's presentation. First, we'll start with an analogy, then we'll tell you a little bit about the cloud, the steps to migration. We're going to walk through what our steps are to help move you to the cloud, a real-world example and a testimonial from one of our clients. Then we'll talk about the modern workplace delivered and what does a modern workplace look like today. And then Mac is going to give us a live demo of some of the Azure tools that are available to you, and then we'll try to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So with that, let's jump right in. So the first thing I would like to emphasize is that the cloud is not a destination. It's not a one and done kind of thing. You don't just move into the cloud and you're done. It is really a capability. It is ever evolving. It is ever changing. There's tons of investments in the cloud. And just yesterday, I logged into the Azure portal. I saw all kinds of new services I hadn't seen before. There is so much offered, and it is a capability that is continuing to expand, it's continuing to evolve, and it's continuing to change. So there's all kinds of capabilities in the cloud. The cloud has kind of become a word that means a lot of different things, and I think we're going to try to break that down for you a little bit today into what kinds of cloud things we might be talking about. So let's start with a little bit of an analogy, and we like to use this one, the electric explanation. So I don't think any of us on this call, or probably very few of us, own a power plant and want to maintain a power plant and have all the transmission lines and everything that's required for a power plant and all the maintenance and headaches that go with a power plant. But we all love electricity. We need electricity for our daily lives. But we really just want to consume that electricity as a service. And you think about the cloud in that way. And we're going to start talking about how that analogy works out. For instance, I don't need to buy a power plant or any of the raw materials to run a power plant or any of that. I don't have that CapEx cost. So one thing that's nice about the cloud is it's easy and inexpensive to set up. There is not a bunch of upfront capital expenditures where you're having to project what you're going to need for the next 3 to 5 years. If I am buying hardware, I'm usually trying to buy not for just today, but out into the future. I want that hardware to last as my organization grows. So I'm probably paying for capacity I don't need. And I have that CapEx expense. Whereas moving to the cloud moves that more to an operational expense. It's flexible to grow with your business, just like we talked about. Here in Texas, it gets really hot in the summer, and so we have a lot of air conditioners that run. And so I want my electricity to scale up during that time. I want to use a lot more electricity to keep my house cool. Same thing with the cloud. You can scale as you need to. Or maybe it says here grow, but it's elasticity really. So when you don't need as much, maybe you have more seasonal business or something like that. You can grow as as you need to, and then you can reduce that consumption as your needs reduce. Maybe you're in a monthly reporting cycle or something like that, and you need something that can scale up during the peak times and then scale back down during the off-peak times. And that's what's great about the cloud. Just like electricity, you're paying for what you use and nothing more. The maintenance is covered by your cloud service provider. So, it's great that the cloud is low maintenance. I don't have to worry about if a power supply goes out. I don't have to worry about the physical plant, the infrastructure, the locks on the doors, all of that kind of stuff. All of that maintenance is taken away from me, and the cloud service provider handles all of that for me. And then you really have a lot of fault tolerance and geo-redundancy that most organizations just can't afford to put into place. So moving to the cloud allows you to be really fault tolerant and geo-redundant. Even if there was a localized disaster, because you're in the cloud, you would be okay. So what is the cloud? Dave likes to say the cloud is actually on the ground. So he tells a little anecdote, Dave, our president, about his dad wanting to know where the cloud was at, but really it's on the ground, and it's a data center. And it looks very similar to something like this. So you have the public cloud, and that's kind of your Microsoft commercial cloud. Would be kind of your public cloud. You can have a private cloud, so you can have a private cloud that exists in your own infrastructure. That's an option. And you can have a hybrid cloud. So you can have a cloud that covers both. You can have a multi-cloud, so you can be across multi-vendors. All of this is a viable cloud strategy, whether you're going to be all in the public cloud, part in the public cloud, part in the private cloud, or you're going to use a multi-vendor strategy and be in lots of different clouds at the time. All are viable cloud strategies. So let's talk about 3 scenarios that migrate from on-premise infrastructure. So I'm going to go from like the most hands-off kind of services to the more hands-on cloud services. The first you might hear a lot talked about is software as a service. Software as a service would be things like Office 365, Dynamics 365. It's going to be your messaging, your SharePoint, OneDrive, all of that kind of stuff. It could be your ERP implementation. Those are things that you don't have to know about the server. You don't really have to know about the application in terms of how to set it up and configure it. All of that is already done for you. When you sign on to Office 365 or Microsoft 365, you're immediately granted a messaging infrastructure that you didn't have to set up or maintain or patch or any of that. So that's kind of software as a service, and it's kind of easy to get started and easy to maintain. The next might be that if you have some databases in your environment and you're like, well, I would like to migrate these databases. I still really don't want to deal with the underlying operating system. I don't want to have to worry about patching it or maintaining it, but I need a full database and I need full access to that database for maybe some custom solution or application that I have in my environment. Then you would look at something that's called platform as a service, and something like that would be like Azure SQL as a service, or applications as a service, all of that kind of stuff. So you still have like the full SQL server or database server on top of not having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. And then the third is maybe you just need some virtual machines. So we probably all have some kind of virtual machines in our environment. You can move to infrastructure as a service. So then I can actually remote into these machines. They are virtual machines in the environment. But I am responsible for maintaining them, for patching, for maintenance, all of that kind of stuff. But I'm not responsible for any of the physical maintenance of these machines. So if something goes wrong, a disk drive fails, a power supply fails, I don't have to worry about the data center. I don't have to worry about any of that. So just depending on your needs, your business requirements, you could use any of these, just whatever is going to work best and be most flexible for your business. So let's talk about some of the fundamental business differences. We've already talked a little bit about expense. So on-premise, it's a capital expense. You are paying for the actual server, all the power consumption, all the space, all of the environmental that you might need for that, and you're paying for it whether you're using it or not. Where the cloud subscription is a monthly fee, and you just pay for what you use. Speed. We all know that approvals take a long time, especially for capital items, and it's hard to, may take weeks or months to get something approved. Azure Platform as a Service, you can literally spin up a VM in like 15 minutes, probably quicker than that. So it's a lot faster. You can iterate and move and be a lot more agile with the cloud. Utilization. It's always on-prem. You're going to probably buy for more than what you need so that you have growth. And then on cloud, you can turn things on and off. When items are off, when the VMs are off, you're not paying for them. So it's very elastic. We talked about that elasticity that you get with the cloud. And then reliability. If you have your own on-prem, there's no guarantee on uptime, or Microsoft guarantees, they have a guaranteed uptime percentage. Management. If I have my own on-prem, I need to have someone available 24/7 to manage that infrastructure in case something goes wrong. Again, we have a failure of a power supply or something like that. I have to do that. Whereas on the cloud, I have a single pane of glass to monitor and manage all of my servers, and I can manage them from anywhere. Redundancy. You might have a SAN in your environment with differing levels of RAID or mirroring, but in the cloud, you can have geographically redundant storage. Again, protecting yourself against any kind of localized disasters. And then we're going to hit on this a lot today. The security that is available to you in the cloud is much more, there's so much offered to you that is just free and part of the service that you pay for. And you have security at scale, layers of encryption. Most people haven't thought about security in the way that the folks at Microsoft think about security. So let's just talk a little bit about growth here. You can see billions of US dollars in growth. It is a continuing, just an explosion of growth in the cloud. You can see this SaaS, the software as a service market, is the largest market segment with $151 billion projected in 2022. So it's not just the cloud providers that are investing, it's companies are continuing to invest their time and money into the cloud. It is a huge growth area for lots of good reasons, and those reasons that we'll talk about more today. So here's a little slide we like to use sometimes. So to you, maybe this napkin as a service might look familiar as what a cloud migration looks like. Everybody often enjoys a Rube Goldberg machine, and sometimes a cloud migration can look a little bit like that. But we're going to try to break it down for you today into some bite-sized chunks. So let us give you our example of a little Rube Goldberg machine here and what a cloud migration might look like. We have kind of steps 1 through 9 here. We're going to discover the footprint, map dependencies, come up with an optimization path, move into production, deploy a cloud migration plan. So we're going to figure out what is best and optimize for that, prepare the environment, and then perform that test migration. Once the test is complete, we're going to move it into production, do QA, and then document. So we'll go into depth into each one of those. So the first thing when you might engage Arctic IT or someone about how I can move things to the cloud, we're probably going to get from you maybe a diagram that looks something like this. We've all seen these. So how is my network physically and logically laid out? What are the users and the business need? What are the servers and workstations that are out there? Are there dependencies, integrations? What kind of compliance requirements do I have? What's the existing infrastructure? What's its age? What's its capacity? Is it ready to be replaced? What's the business impact with or without, and the financial impact with and without? The cloud doesn't have to be a big bang. You don't have to say, okay, well, I want to take everything on premise and move it to the cloud next week. Really, part of this process is to look and see what are the ideal candidates for moving into the cloud. Let's dip our toe into the water. That's what we see most organizations doing. It's just saying, okay, what workloads can we start to move into the cloud? What's maybe a server or a service that we're looking to replace today, and how can we start to kind of see what the cloud might look like for us? So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So the next thing we're going to do is map dependencies and determine the network storage and topology. So we're going to look through your organization, and we're going to see what the application servers are, what databases there are, what are you doing for storing documents? So do you use a traditional file structure? Are you already using SharePoint, SharePoint Online? And then what's your infrastructure look like? So let's find out what those dependencies are, because we don't want to move one thing and then find out that it's dependent on something else on premise. So we need to move things in groups if there's dependencies there. And we want to just be careful to map out all those dependencies and see where those exist. Then we're going to come up with the optimization path. One of the things I love about Microsoft is they have a great kind of tool out there to help you kind of model your workload and your cost. So here you can see, you can go out and you can Google Azure pricing today and get access to the pricing worksheet, and you can start to see what your cost might be. Well, am I going to do a reserved instance or not a reserved instance? Do I need, am I going to pay for it up front, or am I going to pay for it by the month? All of those kinds of things are available. A lot of times when we go in and do this, we can really optimize things. Again, on your on-premise environment, typically because people have redundancy and they're building for the future, they may have a lot of excess. And so you can really look at ways that you can consolidate. And the cloud, remember, is not just taking what you have today and moving it up there, but it's new ways to do things. So maybe you have a SQL server on premise and you want to move to the managed SQL environment in Azure. I mean, that's something that you can do to really optimize what you're doing today on premise, and have Microsoft take care of a lot of that for you. So.
And Phil, this is Mac. If I could jump in on slide 3 really quick.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention something to the folks on the Azure piece around Azure Hybrid Benefit, which is a checkbox that you'll see in about the middle of Phil's screen, right under the OS portion of the savings options. And a lot of people don't know what Azure Hybrid Use Benefit is, or AHUB as sometimes it's called, but Microsoft's done a really good job of allowing you to transition from on-prem to the cloud with ease, especially around, excuse me, Microsoft workloads. So Windows Server, SQL Server, we give you the ability, if you have software assurance for those licenses on-prem and you're using those licenses, let's just say SQL Server, for instance, if you have an enterprise data center edition of SQL Server on-prem, you can move that SQL Server into the cloud without having to incur the licensing cost, because you already have the license based on the on-prem licensing you're already suited for. So checking that box, and this is a process that we can take customers through, will show you savings sometimes up to 75% just based on how much licensing cost is going to go into this cloud workload. So just something to think about. And if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out, because it is, the calculator can get a little confusing sometimes, but we're happy to walk you through it. Thanks, Phil, I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you injecting that, Mac. And it's not just Microsoft has made it really easy to move your workloads, not just from a cost perspective, but from a technical perspective. There's lots of tools that are available out there that really make moving these workloads in a lift and shift kind of fashion easy. So you can, again, it's trying to find those things that are the low-hanging fruit that has real big business impact with not a lot of work, is the best way to kind of get your foot into the cloud door. So the next thing we want to do is develop a cloud migration strategy. So we're going to look at all of these services that you have today. And remember, we talked about, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service. Maybe you have an on-premise Exchange server today. And I know that in my career, the only thing that's kept me up really late at night is managing an Exchange server. So sometimes, they can be a lot. But maybe you want to take that and move it into the Microsoft 365 environment. So you're not managing the Exchange anymore. You're letting Microsoft do that. So we want to develop a cloud migration strategy and take advantage of the best parts of the cloud. What works best for you? Is it infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service? Is it a combination of all those kinds of things? So we're going to examine that and come up with a migration strategy for you. And the next thing is really start to prepare the environment. We really believe, and again, security is so important to what you do. So really what you want to do first is lay down that security model. What's your security posture going to be? I mean, this is kind of a screenshot of a real live instance out there, a VM instance. So what are we doing to secure that? There's so many tools available to you. And then what are you going to use for business continuity? Coming from the days of when I started my career managing tapes and having to change out the tapes in the tape library, managing business continuity in the cloud is so much easier. But what are you doing for that? So we need to prepare that environment, and we need to think about those things. Do we need geo-redundant? How many layers do we need? What do we need for security? All of that kind of stuff. And then the next is to kind of perform an initial test migration and see how things go. Test. It's really important that we understand what's going to happen when we start to move these workloads to the cloud. Make sure we didn't miss anything in that dependency stage. And one of the great things about being in the cloud is testing is relatively cheap and it's easy. So it's easy to, when we move clients to the cloud, we can create a completely sandboxed environment from their normal production systems and test everything so that we know how things are going to behave when we move them into production. It's really important to do that testing aspect. And then upon validation, we're ready to move into production. So we want to make sure all the data has been migrated that we need to migrate. We have managed any business interruption to make sure that none of that has happened. Again, it's really easy to move these environments and workloads into the cloud, and really can not be much of a business interruption if planned properly. Did we do all of our regression testing and make sure that we've tested everything? The backups have tested, making sure our business continuity is in place, the training is complete, and the on-site support is available, and we're ready to go. We're ready to move these workloads into production. Once we're in production, and I think, Mac, you're going to show a little bit about this later, right? Some of the secure score options.
Yeah, we'll be diving into Azure Security Center in the Azure portal, and I'll walk through a couple modules there.
Great. So really, once you get these workloads in the cloud, this is a constant process for you to do. I can't stress how great the recommendations are on Microsoft and the AI that goes into it. It really gives you impactful things to do to increase your security posture, things that you may not have thought about, and then kind of gives you a measurable score so you can see how you're doing. Maybe not everything is for you. Some things may not be applicable to you, but there are very detailed instructions on how to enable these various security features, and I'm just really impressed with all that's available on the security side. But it's something you do once you get that workload into the cloud, and it's something that you want to continue. These recommendations get updated all the time. And so it's looking at your environment. As your environment changes, maybe you add VMs or you add new services, then your recommendations change, and you can go out there and really increase your security posture. Once we've done that, we really want to document everything out. So our network diagram may look a lot different once we moved into the cloud. We want to document all that out. And then we want to schedule maintenance. So Depending on what level, whether we're software as a service, we're infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, there's still maintenance that needs to be done. We want to document that. We want to schedule it so that we can, if again, if we're using Azure VMs and we're responsible for patching them, we need to come up with a maintenance plan for those while they're in the cloud. So there we go. There's a kind of an example of our cloud migration and what we would do. Just again, going through those steps, discovering the footprint, mapping those dependencies, making sure that the workloads that we're moving in groups of things. Come up with an optimization path. Look at where I'm not able to do things today on premise that I can do in the cloud. What are things that I can do? How do I model that cost out? Develop a migration plan. Maybe again, we're going to do a few small workloads, see how those go this quarter. Next quarter, we're going to tackle some of the bigger workloads and save the most complex things to last. Prepare the environment, get everything ready as it relates to business continuity, security, all of that kind of stuff. Test, 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 move into production, and then do security and documentation. So let's talk about a real world example from one of our partners, Mille Corporate Ventures. So Mille came to us probably a year or so ago and said, look, we want to move all of our assets into the cloud. And we helped them do that. And now they are on a completely cloud-based infrastructure, which has really helped them. So they had diversified operations and businesses, NGOs. They wanted to have a modern workplace. Now they have security at scale with multiple layers of protection. We're going to talk about that today. We have lots of layers of protection inside the cloud. That their compliance, we'll talk about compliance needs, are met. And really, this was a big one. Any device, anywhere. They wanted their employees to be able to use any device, anywhere, and still be secure. And we were able to accomplish that for them, which was nice when they had to go to a remote kind of environment. They had the agility of the cloud to deploy new business applications as they evolved and needed. So now they're a lot more agile. They don't have to procure hardware for every new initiative they want to take on. And then they moved all of their voice into Teams voice. So they have a cloud-based PBX. So it was no disruption for them from a phone standpoint when they went from going into the office to being remote. Their voice worked just the same. And then they use us for cloud managed service and support. So we help continue to do these things that we talked about, reviewing their security, helping them with their support incidents, and really have made them a cloud first company. And this was a testimonial from our friend Drew. We made the decision a while back to allow our team to work remotely. We were thankful Arctic IT transitioned us to online services as part of our recent projects with the team. So again, they were ready to be remote, and it wasn't a huge disruption because they were already in the cloud. So let's talk a little bit about the modern workplace. What is a modern workplace? What it is, and how we can deliver it to our clients, our employees, and our partners. Here you can see that Microsoft has over 60 Azure regions across the world, the largest geographic footprint of any cloud provider. So they have data centers all across the world, all across the United States, and really can get you that geo-redundant footprint that you might need. Security, we talked about that. Look, they have over 3,500 full-time security professionals dedicated to security. Again, they're thinking about security. They live and breathe security. These 3,500 people are doing nothing but security. They have that cyber defense operations center, which is really impressive. And then we talk about compliance. There's 93 different compliance offerings that Microsoft can help you achieve by moving into these cloud environments. So one platform for security and governance, there are several Microsoft clouds. Again, we talked about all these, the cloud being kind of a covering for a lot of different things. But let's talk about how we have one platform with Microsoft that no one else really can deliver, from the workstation all the way into the servers and those workloads. So you have Microsoft 365. That includes Windows 10, so your desktop operating system, Teams, SharePoint. That allows you to access those files anywhere on any device. I can use my phone, I can use anything to access the files once they're out in SharePoint and OneDrive. You get updated Office applications, so they're continually updated. Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, Word, and you have Outlook and Exchange, shared calendars, mobility, security, Intune, all of that is available in Microsoft 365. Then you have your line of business apps. You might have ERP or CRM, and that's the Dynamics 365 offering that they have. You have a common data service provider, so you can exchange data between those. They can share that common data service. Full-featured APIs and integration tools. Visual Entity facilitates customization efforts, so you can use and extend Dynamics 365 with other software or with other services that you create, all with their platform. And then the Azure Cloud Platform. So then here's from the software as a service, now we're moving into those platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. Virtual servers, managed database instances. It's security first, so there's a lot of security built into the Azure. And then it provides for continuous operations, lifecycle services, one version. It's always on the latest and greatest technology. When we went from spinning disk to SSD, Azure was already right there. So just switch my disk over to SSD. I didn't have to do anything but click a few buttons. So you're always on the latest and greatest technology and really don't have to worry about that hardware aspect. And then unlimited storage and computing. I'm only paying for what I use. I don't need to buy a SAN 2 times bigger, 3 times bigger than what I need today. I just provision the storage. When I need more, I go out, I click a few buttons, and I add some more storage. I'm only paying for what I need. And then we want to talk about advanced security with the Azure Security Center. One thing that's really impressive is Azure has helped you to provide that layer of security all the way down to on-prem workloads. So you can get secure faster, not just with your cloud-based workloads, but Azure Security Center can look into your on-prem and help you increase your security there as well. And with that, Mac, I will hand it over to you and let you do a demo of Security Center.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, thanks for having me, guys. Again, my name's Mac Quig. I am the Azure Solution Specialist for Microsoft Federal, focused on tribal nations, gaming, and Alaska Native corporations. That being said, as we talked about earlier in the presentation, I want to walk you guys through a small piece of Azure, but a very important piece of Azure. And it's where we spend a lot of our time, which is security. As Phil said earlier, there's a lot of different pillars to security, anywhere from identity to access control to what's being done on the modern workplace side. But when it comes to Azure and your, compute networking resources, et cetera, Security Center is kind of what brings it all together. From the homepage in Azure, simply click the Security Center, and I have a subscription called Azure Security Center Demo. So just realize that yours probably won't look like this. We purposely expose this subscription and the resources in it to make sure that we have security pings and things like that to actually be able to walk you through some of these items. So yours may not look like this. Hopefully it looks a little bit better, but nonetheless, we'll walk through a couple things here. So Azure Security Center, from the top down, kind of helps you simplify your security management for your cloud infrastructure. It's continuously assessing the security state of all cloud resources, whether it's a VM, a subnet, or a specific application. The great thing about Security Center too is it actually monitors your server workloads running in other clouds or on premise. So whether you have a database server that's running in AWS or it's still on premise, we can at least monitor and make sure the health of that resource is aligned with the policies and compliance that you guys put in place. That's sort of aligned to the goals of your business, right? So Secure Score is about visualizing that data and then getting the insights to make actions on the data that you get back. So Security Center is deeply integrated with logic apps and other tools that basically allow you to remediate security actions or anything else in real time. And I'll actually show you that here. One other sort of thing to mention before we dive in, the hybrid story around Microsoft Azure is where we really shine versus other public clouds. Microsoft's really put a lot of effort and investment into making sure that cloud is not the only option when you come to Microsoft. You can still have a hybrid environment and be efficient. So Security Center is going to give you things like a secure score, which is, this is the dashboard, right? You can set this dashboard up however you'd like to see, but for me personally, I have my secure score, my compliance, subscription coverage. So if I go back to the directory, you can see I have, I don't know, probably 20 subscriptions, right? And we're just in the ASC demo, but if I wanted to, I could select all my subscriptions for my organization, read this data for all of them combined at a high level. So we'll walk through a couple of these pieces and then we'll kind of end up on the policy side because I want to make sure we get to that. So just to start, let's go to Secure Score. And the scope is going to be what subscription you selected, right? So right now I've got 41 of 60 points, and this is the subscription that we're reading. So if we go in here, you'll see why my secure score is 41 of 60 points, okay? So it gives you controls and then actions on how to increase your security posture. As Phil was talking about, the recommendations, they're extremely granular. I mean, this is going to get down to the actual machine and then what's going on with the machine that's making it not compliant, or it could be better. So as you can see here, there's a couple of them that have been completed. There's a couple that have been identified as quick fix. So if we go in here, a vulnerability assessment solution should be enabled on your VMs, pretty straightforward. You come in here, and this is not my subscription, it's a subscription that's shared within Azure Specialist, so I don't have the access to be able to go in here and actually remediate, but this is what you would do. So this Ubuntu server right here, right, that's giving us some trouble. I would check that, and I would go to remediate, or I could trigger a logic app that would then trigger an action within Azure. So let's say we need to add the vulnerability assessment solution, right? We can trigger a logic app to do that without us having to get into all the nitty gritty. So it's a really good tool to kind of be able to add actions to individual security events. Those actions can be templates that we've already put in here. So, you know, a lot of the quick fixes you'll see are just something being turned on or something being reconfigured. And Azure can do a lot of that stuff on its own. But where it gets interesting is you can dive into your policies and logic apps that you make that are completely creative. They're yours. You come up with the parameters of the whole entire thing. So it's in essence, you have a security event that keeps happening over and over and over again just because of your environment, right? Maybe you guys are testing some kind of security access, and the security access is getting pinged because that's what you're testing. Well, that may flag Security Center, but you know the solution and you know what's going on because you're controlling the test. You can then make a logic app to trigger every time this alert goes off. Let's make sure this happens. And a lot of times, those can be alerts to certain individuals, which is sometimes the number one thing we need to do in a security event is make sure the right people understand what's going on. Or it can be an actual action, like we talked about earlier, that'll trigger some kind of technology event.
Yep.
So that's
One thing I like about it is,
Yeah, go
it
ahead.
shows you the severity of, these are your biggest impact items. Do these first, kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll get into that in recommendations and some of the regulatory compliance. But at the end of the day, the overview, the secure score itself is just trying to motivate you to have a better, more secure environment. And, it's hard to argue with that. So within Security Center, you have a lot of different capabilities. Obviously, you have the visualization piece that's more, kind of Power BI dashboard type looking. But we can get into some of the workflow automation, which this is where kind of the logic apps come into play. And we won't spend a lot of time here because we could spend all day here. But essentially, what you're doing in here when you add a workflow automation, which that's what these are, you're setting up either your trigger conditions, your actions. So you may already have a logic app, or in my case, I have a lot of logic apps that are, already there. So for instance, this one, send notification email. So your trigger conditions would be what happened, your actions would be send that email. And you can create that and it'll populate here. If we go down to compute and apps, I want to show you something pretty cool here. If we go to VM and servers, and just when you're working through the Azure portal, understand that it's the largest .NET website in the world. So it can be a little slow sometimes. Here we go. All right, so these are individual resources. These are individual machines that you can go into and say, okay, what are the recommendations for this individual VM? And if we dive in here, you'll see your recommendations list. And as Phil was mentioning, all this stuff can be sorted by status, by alphabetical order, however you want to do it. And you'll see some of these things in here, right? Quick fix, it's a medium. Network traffic data collection agent should be installed on Windows virtual machines. Granted, some of these items, depending on what you're doing with the machine, you may not want to enable them. But it's trying to look at the configuration pieces that we don't often think about when we're setting up VMs, especially if we're setting up VMs using something like Cloud Shell, where we're deploying massive amounts of machines at one time. And the other side of the coin is, a very popular service now is Azure Kubernetes service, right? And with that comes a lot of configuration. And the configuration can be based on mostly templates going into different types of services in those containers. But the problem we run into is different kinds of configuration problems. That's where Security Center can look, and you can come in here and you can look at your AKS workload individually without having all the other stuff around it. And you can actually see, okay, what's going on in the Kubernetes? What is it actually affecting? And what is the effect? And this will give you a nice area of, where's the resource group? Okay. What's the resource name? A recommendation summary, the name of the resource, making sure that all pieces are set to where you know that all your configurations passed at least the assessments you put in place. So we'll get into that now. So one quick thing before we dive into compliance, the networking topology is pretty cool. So you can come in here. This is the networking of my entire subscription of ASC demo. So this is the topology from the subscription out. So as you can see, this is a virtual network, a subnet, and then these are my resources, right? So that's a resource group, resource type of virtual machines. The cool thing is there's layers. So my map only has these 2 layers, but if you add allowed traffic, now you're seeing exactly where the internet traffic can actually go. And this map is fully customizable. So let's just say I decided I want to see all of mine. Now, I think it's resetting by itself. Yeah. So this is your 30 subscriptions that you can click to. And as you can see, some of these well, all these machines have the actual, kind of warning severity. You can click into this and it will actually give you the recommendation for that resource. So if you don't like looking at it in list format, you want to see a more logical view of what you have going on with your machines, where they're connecting. You can see this is my Fortinet, and just-in-time access should be applied on the virtual machines, right? Pretty straightforward. So that's another cool feature. If we go into regulatory compliance, oh, I'm in all my subscriptions. That's not going to be pretty.
That visualization really helps you out a lot. Like, instead of looking at everything, like you said, in list views and trying to understand your traffic flows, being able to see that is really
right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more we can look through dashboards, and think about it this way, right? A lot of you guys on the phone might be pretty advanced, in technology. A lot of our leadership may not be, right? So being able to provide them with a view that can explain your security posture in cloud. And trust me, I've worked with this account base long enough to understand. We know there are issues with data sovereignty. We know there are issues with tribal councils being willing to move to more advanced technology. We get that. But when we're talking about compliance, this is where we can prove out some of the capabilities that we all know the cloud has, right? One thing to say we can do it, another thing to prove it and show it. So right here, you'll see just in this dashboard, you can see some of the compliance standards that are looked at as far as controls go. And you'll see ISO, SOC. This is our security benchmark. So this is basically what Azure best practice security is. CIS, custom. So this is, somebody just built this into this platform. But if you build a custom policy, a custom set of compliance standards that your organization needs to conform to, maybe NIST doesn't include everything you guys need, or maybe CIS doesn't, or HIPAA, but a combination of those controls is exactly what you need. Well, custom policy demo, you can do all of that. I said demo, custom policy, you can do all of that within the compliance structure. And you can apply that to different subscriptions. So a lot of times we talk about the hierarchy of Azure and how we can make sure that things are organized by department, by unit, however you want to do it. What that comes with is governance, right? So if we have a subscription for a group inside of the enterprise organization and a subscription for a group inside of the gaming organization, they may be governed by two separate kinds of controls. And with that, you're able to do that. You're able to give one set of controls over here, one over here, and you can still view them in a single pane of glass, which is the number one point in all this is, let's simplify how we look at security and how we can then react to security. And Security Center is going to keep progressing and progressing. Obviously, we have Sentinel now. There's some other solutions that are integrated into that. So when we look at Security Center, it's not a one, you don't turn Security Center on and all of a sudden we're fixed. It's as Phil was mentioning earlier, it's a journey, right? We're working towards a better goal of how we lay out our environments, how we configure things, how efficient we are at reacting to security events. I mean, think about the billions of dollars that could be saved because of the amount of time that it takes to react to a security event, right? It's astronomical. So being able to be efficient in that way is super important. And Security Center is the starting point for that in Azure. We could, I'm sure Phil and I could go back and forth and talk about this all day, but unfortunately we have an hour. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed looking at the Azure portal, seeing a little bit and understanding a little bit more about what you can do with Security Center. I'd love to get a lot deeper with you guys on this. So if you have any questions, if there's anything that I can help you with, please feel free to reach out, and Phil, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Mac. That was really helpful. It's always good to see that. I learn something new each time as well. There's a lot offered inside of that Security Center. So let me see if I can share my screen. Yeah. So you see my screen still, Mac?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, sorry.
couple more slides to bring it home. So let us help you modernize. We talked about that modern workplace, and we can do that with a combination of Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, and Azure. And all of these things, again, what's really great about the Microsoft suite and stack of products is it goes all the way from the workstation all the way up to the server and every service in between. So all of these can work together. It's having that unity and that single pane of glass that Mac was talking about. So we can chat and meet together in Microsoft Teams, or take an email and make it into a chat or whatever. We can do that. Share calendars. That's something we really all need to do in this time, so I can see what other people are doing because they may not be in the same office. Collaborate on things together. You know, it's great within the Microsoft 365 environment for 2 or 3 people in our company, all in different locations, to be working on the same Word document all at the same time, and then being on chat and being able to kind of help each other wherever we need to offer our areas of expertise. Engage anywhere, anytime, any device. We talked about that, being able to be anywhere you need, anytime. And build power apps and workflows all into this, so all this integrated. And then report and forecast with real-time analysis. Ultimately, you can save time, money, and resources with cloud technology and security at scale. We looked a lot at that security today. It's not just offered in Azure, but it's offered in Dynamics and in the Microsoft 365 stack. You can really increase your security posture and make your resources available anywhere, anytime. So we would love to help you transform to a modern workplace, and love to have a complimentary technical conversation from Arctic IT. Now is the time to implement Microsoft 365 if you're not already on there, and then to let us walk through these steps of what a cloud migration looks like for you. Start to dip your toe into the cloud if you're not already there, or help you accelerate it if you're already there. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. I want to remind people there are handouts available that you can get, and so those are made available to all attendees. Chuck, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Philip and Mac, thanks a lot for everything. It was all very good. I want to remind everybody, if you do have questions, go ahead to the chat box and enter those in for us. The first question, the example you mentioned during the presentation, how long and how many resources were required to move them to the cloud?
Well, it was certainly a journey, like Max said. It wasn't like when we moved to Mille, it wasn't a big bang like we talked about. So we used a lot of our resources. I said the migration probably took something like 6 months or something like that. And was just staged with various people at times. So you would use a couple of professionals from Arctic IT at each stage, depending on, as we break those processes down, you want to get the subject matter expert in there. So we would change out our resources to help them make those migrations. So it was a journey, but it can be done and broken down into bite-sized steps with like minimal business disruption.
Excellent. Thanks, Philip. What does it take to manage Azure? You know, what kind of training is involved? You guys got into the demo at the end. You know, what's it going to take to get one of my people up to speed and feel comfortable managing that environment?
It's a great question. You know, I will let Mac answer this a little bit, but I can tell you there's lots of free training available out there that Microsoft provides, and there's tons of resources that are available out there. You can, again, as you start to dip your toe in the water and not full force in, you can start to just learn the pieces that apply to you, because trying to learn it all is impossible. None of us know it all. So in a quick work, you can learn what you need to know to move some of those workloads to the cloud, and those dashboards and those visuals really help you. Mac, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of echo, we have resources on Microsoft Learn We also have some more account-focused resources. So we came out with a program about a year ago called Enterprise Skilling Initiative. And what that initiative entailed was our products are getting more technical, our industry is getting more technical, our customers are getting more technical. We need to build skilling plans around that. One thing I would definitely start with is what's called AZ900. If you just do a quick search for AZ900, you'll see it's the Azure Fundamentals course. And that coursework will set you up for understanding the terminology, your way around the portal, and your way around the different services and things of that nature. So that's where I would start. If you have any questions, or if you want to get involved in more of like a broad organizational training, you know, something a little bit more in depth, then feel free to reach out to me. We'll get something set up.
Great. Thanks, Mac. So one last question. How does the cloud prevent you from losing data?
That's a great question. There are lots of, it just depends on, you know, which we're talking about, the software as a service or the platform infrastructure as a service. But, you know, I know that when years and years ago, when I made, you know, my first foray into the cloud, I was worried about that very same thing. We talked about that business continuity aspect that Microsoft provides. Even if you delete things, many things, especially on the Microsoft 365 side, are kept for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever that retention period is. So someone accidentally deletes something, it's easy to get it back. There's all kinds of, we apply all kinds of backups in our environment for all those VMs and workloads. So it's easy to go back to any kind of point in time. Like I said, I think from a backup and business continuity strategy, it's so much easier to be in the cloud than it was before. Mac, you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Not really, just more around security controls and role-based access, right? You can do a lot to lock down your data. And there's a lot of protections, both built-in protections and sort of secondary protections that we can apply, like Phil was mentioning around disaster recovery, retention, et cetera. And then there's also ways to lock down, you know, the keys, the access to the data itself, right? So there's a plethora of options there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Guys, that's all the questions that we have for you today. Is there anything that you'd like to share before we say goodbye to the audience?
No, thanks a lot. Thanks, Mac. Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate your help today.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Phillip, Mac, thanks a lot. We certainly appreciate you being here, and we look forward to more. Just a reminder to our audience, TribalWise has training packages available. As you can see, Renita saved over 231% on the cost of her license for online training. Give us a call, reach out to us, email us at contactus@tribalwise.com. We'd be happy to go and personalize a solution for you and find what makes sense. We'll save you money and provide you many options that you're not aware of today. And we've got more TribalWise webinars coming up. As you can see, we've got 2 more in September, and then we kick off October. We've got Curvature, a Buyer's Edge platform. Arctic is back again with SparkRock, and then Veeam. So please go out to TribalWise.com, log in and sign up today. Let your friends know about it, let your colleagues know. And of course, if you can't see them live, we keep them online as well. So again, this was Chuck Scharnagel with TribalWise. I want to say thanks again to Arctic and Microsoft. It was a great webinar. We look forward to seeing you on September 24th. Have a great day.